Welcome to the Catholic Dadcast by Rich Pintang, where we break down all things dad from a Catholic perspective. Now more than ever, we need dads to step up their game. Gentlemen, buckle up and get ready for battle. What is good? The Catholic Dadcast coming at you with another powerful episode. We are here out of sunny Southern California, and I have a very special guest here to speak on alcoholism and recovery. And what I'll tell you is episode 5 is going to bring a lot of value to you guys. I'm hoping that you guys can understand and hear how God works in amazing ways when you truly surrender and you allow him to work in your life. So what I'll share with you guys is we're coming around the time of the holidays, and I urge you to hear what we have to say. And our guest, he is very well known in his selfless giving in our community. He is a Grand Knight for the Knights of Columbus. He is a co-founder of the Skid Row ministry, serving the most poor of the poor here in Southern California. He is a strong advocate of the pro-life movement, and he is based here in sunny Southern California, dedicated father of one. Welcome to the show, Brendan O'Shea. Great to have you.
Privileged to be here. All those things that all the titles, if you will, that I have, they just come from what's the next indicated step. And throughout my life, like I got to be a real mess with alcohol, and it took me to some very scary places. And I was able to get sober. And all I've done since then is that I've taken the next indicated step, and I've got a very good relationship with our God. And he just tells me and puts things in front of me, and I just go ahead and I just keep on walking. And it doesn't seem like I'm anything close to being a saint or anything like that. I'm just following instructions. And that's how I got sober.
And that's a very direct teaching about being obedient. And as stubborn as men are, sometimes it's really about listening as opposed to forcing our opinions on others. But Brendan, we're recording now. It's going to release in December during the holiday season. We're already starting to hear the holiday music. And sometimes we just kind of get carried away. What was it like for you growing up, being that you are an Irishman, and what was it like in the family environment between Catholicism and even where alcohol was in the family?
Oh boy.
Where do we begin?
What can you say about the Irish and alcohol? My dad came from a family of 13, and I got the opportunity to meet all of my aunts and uncles. And of those 13, there was 6 of them that were clearly alcoholic, and we would go over there, and my dad too was alcoholic. And we had a big bar in the front room, and people would come through the front door, and it would be belly up to the bar, and as you can see, this used to hang over his bar. And I do that in remembrance to my father. My father had a very rough life growing up in Ireland, and being in that family and living in a small house on a 35-acre farm, everybody had to pull their weight. And when he came along, there wasn't room in the house. So he was put out to live with an aunt. And the aunt would put him in the barn with the animals. And if you could imagine Ireland in the wintertime, like it's constantly raining and cold, and he had a very difficult upbringing. Now, we didn't understand that when we were kids, okay? He was a very strict, driven person who came over here in the 20s, went through Ellis Island, and he was able to pull himself up. And it was through his own self-discipline that he was able to do these things. But too, he was what we would call a functioning alcoholic. And he would have a couple of drinks and then he'd come home at night, and he was generally speaking, he was in a bad mood, and he was a very strict disciplinarian. And for some reason, he kind of had it in for me. And I used to get the belt on occasions and stuff like that. And he was very difficult. He kind of had it out for me. And my two brothers would tell you the same thing. But what I kind of think it is that he saw in me the characteristics of the potential alcoholic. And what I say there is alcoholics typically, of which 1 out of 10 people, and that's a statistic, it's a very real statistic, are going to have a problem with drinking. And that's just a general statistic. Okay, that being said, and we have these characteristics within us that are very selfish people, and we don't realize it at the time. We're very stubborn. We've got these characteristics. And that also is one of the driving forces that make us the alcoholic that we are. For some reason, we're like round pegs trying to fit into a square hole. And the first time I took a drink was when I was 14. And, and I liked it. Okay. A lot of people, they'll take their first drink and they'll sit there and say, well, I could take her or leave it. But there's 1 out of 10 people that are going to say, hey, where can I get some more of that?
It's odd. It's odd hearing that you say that, Brendan, that your dad being an alcoholic and having a hard upbringing, that out of all the kids, he targeted you.
It is strange, and there's a lot about alcoholism that science, quite frankly, still doesn't understand. And I can see it in other people as well. And when I'm trying to help somebody that's got a drinking problem, I love the person, but I hate the disease, and it's having a monkey on your back, and having lived it, and it's very difficult for a person that doesn't have a drinking problem to understand those characteristics of a person that is alcoholic. And it's very difficult also for an alcoholic to try to explain to a person that doesn't have the disease, how their mind operates. And it's, it is a mental illness that I have, okay? And I've found a way through the goodness and forgiveness and the power of God to go ahead and to relieve that obsession to drink. The disease is still present in me. If I choose to go ahead and take another drink, I'll be back on the cycle once again. That cycle drove me to hell.
It's very bold of you to say, Brendan, because for like a lot of folks that, let's say, don't understand it really in depth, and don't understand how addiction and the disease really can take over psychologically and physiologically, it's hard to really fathom that you never really truly recover, but that it's an ongoing battle. But you recognize that, and you know that really it's not acceptable to have one sip or a glass of wine that night at the social gathering. And I think that's I think that part of it is understanding the alcohol abuse and alcoholism and how they're kind of going around the same path, but kind of different characteristics. And you recognize it years later, knowing that. I think that's important for a lot of the listeners to understand.
I'd like to say this, and as I started, I was going through high school, and then on Friday night we would go out and we would have a couple of beers and stuff. And then I was able to recognize that, like I was ordinarily, if you believe it or not, I was a shy guy. And I would have a couple of beers and then I would get nice and loose and I could talk chit chat and I could dance and I could do all those things that I wanted to be able to do normally. But I found out that if I had a couple of beers and like I could go talk to girls and I can go ahead and I can do all of these things and be hip, slick, and cool. So that was kind of my pattern, is that, like I would have a couple of beers, I go into a party, and then I began to realize that I could consume more alcohol than other people could. Okay. And as my disease progressed, I was able to consume more and more. And I would use this as a crutch to go in and, and to be able to socialize. And something happens along the way and the tables turn. And that's the strange thing about this alcoholism, is something that I used to use as a crutch to go ahead and make me socially acceptable. Something happens along the way, and then it became a matter of maintenance. I needed that drink. And that's the strangest thing that happens to us alcoholics, is something that we used to use for lubrication. It becomes a necessity. And I even got to the point that I would get the shakes if I was going, like later on in the day. And I just started, and I began to drink on a daily basis. The last couple of years of my drinking career, like I was drinking basically every day. And I would base my days around my drinking. I'd say, okay, I got to get up, I got to go to work, and I got to do this and that and this and that. Then I can go ahead and I can drink. And that's what I used to live about. And what had happened is alcohol became my higher power. I used to base my life around my drinking. And it's like I said before, it's difficult for me to explain these things to somebody that does not have an alcohol problem. Okay. But it is true. That's what happened to me. And, and I'd like to also say that, yes, I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. Why am I on this podcast if I'm supposed to have anonymity? Okay. Fact of the matter is I'm a construction guy. Now, if I was running a business, if I was a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, absolutely. I could understand somebody that would want to go ahead and you would want to respect his anonymity because it would affect maybe customers. If I knew I was going to go under the knife, I don't know if I'd like to have an alcoholic working on me, and so on and so forth. But a construction guy like me, I mean, come on. How much trouble could you get into? That's kind of what my attitude is. In addition to that, I'm not embarrassed about my alcoholism. I mean, I'm still living in the same town that I grew up in, and it was no news to anybody else that I quit drinking because they'd seen me at my worst. Okay. But then on the other hand too, why should I be embarrassed about the smartest thing I ever did? And stopping alcohol was the smartest thing that I ever did. And I did that 32 years ago. Okay.
Praise God.
It's been an amazing journey. And I'll tell you what, it's been a very difficult journey because I did check into alcohol treatment center. Okay. Before I got in there, I was at the point of, okay, now if I continue drinking, I am going to die. Okay. And you know what? I was kind of okay with that. That's how bad my life had gotten. Okay. I always showed up for work. Okay. I would set my alarm. I'd be the first guy out at the job site. I got paid good money. I was doing a lot of tract housing and stuff, and I had a crew. And I just so happens I'm very good at what I do. Okay. So regardless of how much trouble I got into because I was hungover on the job and this and that, the boss always hung on to me. Why? Because I made him a lot of money. Okay. And so I never really did have any financial problems, but my social life was a disaster. My family had just gotten to the point that they kind of had to discontinue me. And that, quite frankly, was the best thing that they could have done to me. is that I was living in this condominium up in Rancho Cucamonga for a while, and then I was living in an apartment down here in Yorba Linda, and I had this secluded life. I had this little, it was kind of neat. I had this entry yard, and somebody would ring the bell out front, but I may or may not answer the door because I had a breezeway between the two, and they weren't per se knocking on my door. And then I had my recorder call on, and this is towards the last days of my drinking, and I had a recording machine. So people would call me and I wouldn't answer the phone because I was busy. I was busy drinking. I was busy feeding my disease. And that's the place that I wanted to be. And then I just got at wit's end, and then I surrendered. I said, okay, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Please, Lord, help me. And so I ended up going into a care unit.
Do you remember that moment when you felt like maybe, was it God talking to you, or was it something in front of you that said, this is falling apart?
There was a commercial on TV, and they had this institution called the Care Unit, and it had a picture of these guys. They were lighting candles, and they had this music going on, and they were saying, like, I'm sober for a year, I'm sober for 2 years, and I'm thinking to myself, well, and then they had the music going on. We take insurance, and I come, and I thought that might be just what I needed, is a little vacation, and to get my life back on track, and then I could go ahead and go back to business as usual. I really didn't have any plans on stopping drinking as long as I have. Okay, I just wanted to take a little break. That little break ended up costing me. It's the funny thing about this is I went in there on October 31st, and not known to myself is my company changed insurance carriers. And starting on November 1st, which is my sobriety date, they had changed the insurance, and we no longer covered that kind of help. So sobriety institutions. And this thing ended up costing me $15,000. So coming out of there, I knew that my next drink was going to be a $15,000 drink. So that, plus I was taking Antabuse, and I went in there, and they kind of brought me down off the alcohol, and I stayed in there for a little more than a couple of weeks. And then I went out, and I went to my first meeting, and it was over here in Orange, outside of that institution. And I started running into friends, people that I knew from high school. And then I began to realize that, what? I'm not the only one, and they helped me along the way. They gave me encouragement. And what I did is I just got busy, and I went to a lot of meetings. Did I lose the obsession to drink? No way. I still had this monkey on my back, even after that long. And I thought about drinking all the time. It was in the back of my mind, and that's simply what I had done. Like I said before, I had been drinking for quite some time, but I thought about it a lot. And I'd go to these AA meetings, and they were all zippity-doo-dah, happy-go-lucky. And I'm thinking, boy, what's with these guys? But I do see that they're not drinking, and the best that I can do. And I really, really, I wanted to stop drinking, but I didn't want to buy into their 12-step program. I thought that was kind of corny. And, I'm looking at, I could do that. And I did that. And no, I don't want anything to do with that, and I'm looking on the wall at these steps. And so what I did is I toughed it out, and I was able to stay sober for a year. When I went to get my chip, I went up there, and I had gotten sober in this institution with 30 other people, but there was only 2 people still sober at that time. Okay. The rest of everybody else went out. Then I went back for my 18-month chip, and I was the only one. And so for some reason I thought, well, an alcoholic can't stay sober for 18 months, so I mustn't have this disease. Okay. And so this guy got up to the podium, and God put him up there. And he was this older man. He was about 75 years old. and he was missing his teeth, and he was from Kansas, and he talked really hokey, and he was sober for 5 years. And he talked about drinking vodka. He talked about the feelings that he got when he was drinking. And my gosh, I mean, this old man was telling my story. And so I went up to him after the meeting and I asked him to be my sponsor. And this guy, non-denominational Christian guy, he sat me down and he said, okay, now we're going to do the steps. And I said, well, I'm on step 4. He said, no, we're going to start at step 1. And so he started me through the steps. And then when you're taking the third step is to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. And I sat there in the truck with him that night. And he's saying, you need to go ahead and you need to believe that God's going to take care of you. Okay. And he knew that I was struggling with the disease still, you see. And I said, yeah, but what about, and then he interrupts me. He says, okay, listen, let go. Absolutely. And I did. Yeah, but he goes, no, yeah, buts. You need to let go. Absolutely. We stood at the turning point. We asked for his protection and care with complete abandon. And so I listened to what he said. And then I would just go ahead and I said, okay, all right. I'm going to put all this stuff in your hands, Lord. And when it gets all screwed up, it's your fault. And I was able to do that. And I just said, okay, let's go. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And then I sat back and the strangest thing happened to me. And it still brings chills to me today. I felt this warm glow come over my body. And the obsession to drink was just lifted right out of me at that moment in time. And I looked over at him and he's sitting there with a toothless grin and he said, how about that? And he knew what happened to me. And ever since that time, the obsession to drink, I've been back to Ireland. I've been to all kinds of bar scenes and all kinds of stuff. And I'll walk down the liquor aisle at the store and it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. That's what God did for me.
What a defining moment. Imagine the type of demons that you are going through at the beginning portion of AA. And then also understanding that, you know, maybe I'm not the only one that's going through this, seeing your friends, but maybe that was also God's way of sending people saying that it's okay. Just stick with it, stick with me. And then having that kind of defining moment and having this particular toothless gentleman give you tough love and to allow you to truly surrender. I can imagine you reflecting on those kind of moments when you felt like you were filled with the Holy Spirit, and you can look at the cross at St. Martin's and say, that's the kind of surrender, you know, this cross represents. That I can understand why that brings you chills. And those are the defining moments that I think those that do deal with this should yearn. And it's only through the grace of God that we can receive those kind of moments.
I stuck around for the miracle. That's what I did. And I didn't follow the instructions to the best of my ability, but I still stuck around for the miracle. People had told me when I got into the program, they said, you need to work the steps, you need to get a sponsor, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I just half measured the whole thing. But then after that moment, I started taking a different look at the program itself. And what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is basically identifying the reasons why we were drinking in the first place. And we sit there and then we look at, first you start with, you surrender yourself, okay, to the bottle. And that's the one step that you got to do 100%. then you go ahead and you get familiar with God. And that wasn't a problem for me. Went to parochial school. But the interesting thing about that is that going to parochial school, the God that I knew in parochial school, and I dealt with the nuns and all that stuff. And they said, you do this, you're going to go to hell. You do that, you're going to go to hell. And it was a lot of fire and brimstone when I was growing up. In addition to that, I was Vatican I, and you go to mass and you're up there seeing the priest with his back turned towards you, back turned at you, saying Latin, and it was hard for me as I was a kid to understand what was going on, but I knew that I had to sit up and fold my arms because the nun would come by and crack you upside the head with a pin. Okay, and that was the strict discipline that I got when I was going through grade. So this God that I knew back then, he was pretty tough. Okay, but this other gentleman, that I ran into, he told me about this God that loves me and forgives me for the things that I did. And then I got plugged back in to the Catholic faith, and I found out that things had changed a lot since when I was a kid, and I am surrounded by the most saintly people today, and that's kind of what got me into action. After I had been, I went back to work and I was able to excel at work without having, without having to drink. And I had worked for the same outfit for 10 years in my drinking career. And then a couple of years after I had gotten sober, they wanted to make me a superintendent, and then I ended up running divisions and stuff, and I excelled very quickly in the corporate ladder, and I was director of operations for a shop of 4,000 guys. And I had a lot of responsibility back then, in time to come. But it was kind of strange, and I did a lot of flying, and I would fly from one division to another, and I was doing troubleshooting on jobs that were struggling. And I spent a lot of time in hotels. And I got to thinking, that is this really the life that I want to have? Is this what I got sober for? And I started to wish that, it's too bad that I can't help other people that are struggling with the disease of alcoholism, and I wanted to get closer to God, but I was out there making money. And in the meantime, I had gotten married because, I had this attitude that, well, if I could lick alcohol, this gal came along. Here I was 39 years old at that time. And I thought, yeah, okay, all of my friends are married. So I thought that this was the thing to do. And this gal looked pretty good. She had a 3-year-old daughter who was just lovely. And so I kind of rushed into that, and I found out that ended up being a mistake. Okay. But the one thing that did happen is that I was looking into getting an annulment, and then she came home pregnant. So I ended up staying married to her for 10 years as we were raising the kids, and I had adopted her daughter. And that was a blessing because I still have, Kyle lives with me today. Kyle is a special needs kid and just about the most wonderful person that you would ever want to meet. He follows, at an early age, I took Kyle to AA meetings with me. Okay. And he's been to several different events having to do with alcoholism and stuff. And I figure, hey, just like in my father's case, it's a genetic disease. So I figure he's got my genes. So, if he takes a drink, we know what's going to happen. So here he is. He's 23 years old. He hasn't smoked a cigarette or a joint or ever taken a sip of beer, because what I did is I took him to meetings and I didn't shove it down his throat, but he loves the people in AA that I've met along the way. And he loves the work that we do in trying to help out people that have troubles with drinking. That kind of, and like I said before, one thing leads to another. The next indicated step was I was at a meeting one time, and and what had happened with my job is that back in 2008, the company that I had spent 31 years working for went bankrupt. Okay. God does for us what we could not do for ourselves. Okay. I'm coming home. I'm going down to see my mom in Yorba Linda. And I go into the house. The door was locked, and I opened it with the key, and I went back to go check on my mom. And she's older. Okay. And I went into her room, and she was staring at the wall. And I thought to myself, how long has she been like that? So I gave her a little poke, and I said, hello, Mom. And she looks at me and he goes, well, hello, Mike. Now, Mike is my dad's name. So here she is, you know, like she's in La La Land. She had trouble. She could hardly see. Her teeth were falling out. Her mind wasn't right. And so God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I lost that job, and I spent a couple of weeks working with my mom, and I got her in to get her cataracts removed. She could see now. Got her into the dentist, got her fixed up, put her on Namenda and Aricept to go ahead and help with her head. And she was in La La Land, okay, you know, like, and that's how it is when you've got Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed, and so I was able to work with Mom and got her back on her feet a little bit. And then I get a call from my ex-wife, and she's in tears, and she's up in Sacramento with the 2 kids. And she says, I don't know what to do. My dad's sick. He's in the hospital right now. And I told her, I said, well, I got some good news and I got some bad news. The good news is I could come watch the kids. The bad news is I lost my job at 31 years. And so that's what I was able to do. I was able to get on the plane, go take care of the kids for a couple of weeks. And then I popped back down, and I was able to spend more time going back and forth between the kids and my mom. And so you see, this is all stuff that I was able to do, and I wouldn't have been able to do if I was still working. So you see, this is a very interesting part of my journey, because that was the next indicated step. I didn't know what God was doing, but I was just walking. I was just putting one foot in front of the other. And these were things that are popping up in front of me. I go to a meeting one day, and this guy come up to me, and he said, yeah, I started doing work over at Mary's Kitchen. It was some work for the homeless people. Okay. And he said, yeah, I hear that you're cooking for the homeless now. Have you been to Skid Row? I said, Skid Row? Oh, that sounds interesting. He goes, well, I went down there last week, and I brought a case of water. And it was really cool going down there and handing out water on the street. And I said, yeah, okay, well, next time you go, let me know. He goes, I'm going tomorrow. So we went ahead and grabbed a couple of cases of water. Me and him went down there, and then we were handing out bottles of water on the street. And it felt cool. People were very appreciative. So we come back, and then I was telling a couple of the other folks, next week we went down there with a case of water, with a truckload of water. And then we handed out water down up the street. And the 3 people turned into 4 or 5 people. A guy came along and said, have you thought about handing out clothes? So we went ahead and we started doing the clothes. A good buddy of mine comes along and he says, well, can you use T-shirts? I said, T-shirts? Oh yeah, they'd go over big. He goes, well, my son, he has a screen printing shop. And he said when they make a mistake, they can't sell them. So he's got a whole bunch of them that are defective. So I said, okay, well, bring them on down. How many you got? He goes, a couple thousand. I said, oh, perfect. So we go on down to Skid Row, and we start handing out these T-shirts to everybody on the street. And it just so happened that we were going back the next week. So there we are. We're driving down the street in the following week, and we drive down San Julian and San Pedro, and there's all these people walking around on the street with Yorba Linda Country Club, Esperanza Band, and all of these shirts, and it was just a scream. And it's just so rewarding seeing the people down there, and then the looks in their eyes, and they sit there and they hand them a bottle of water or give them a pair of shoes, and they say, why do you do this? And I guess it's the right thing to do.
It's
That's all there
almost
is
as
to it.
if you can really reflect on what Father C had shared at the 10 o'clock mass is because we love you, and that's what Jesus teaches us. For those of you that are just joining us, we're with Brendan O'Shea, and we're talking about the alcoholism and the recovery process, and thus far, what we've been getting is more than we probably could have asked for. In considering what the topic is, the one of the Bible verses that came up that really resonates with me is Ephesians 5:18, where it says, "And do not get drunk on wine, in which lies debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit." That in itself reminds me of your experience with your your godsent from Kansas with no teeth. Um, the second thing I was going to mention was talking about how you were so dedicated to your career that you most men feel like they're accomplishing that because we as the household leader are meant to quote bring home the bacon and be a provider, and what we don't realize is that we should be a provider financially and spiritually, and it goes both ways. And I'm hoping that the folks that are going to listen to this that are possibly dealing with someone in their family that might have an alcohol abuse problem and or alcoholism learn how to recognize it. And what I'm hoping is you can give some things, some advice on that, because I think a lot of us have probably some time in our life have had some sort of alcohol incident that's very, very vivid, and it's crucial for us to show that tough love, to pull that person aside, and to have that tough conversation, because you can look back at your life years later in one way, or you can look at it the way you've been able to see the fruits of God's labor in you, using you as an instrument of your peace. And I think, especially in the holiday time, how often are you going to hear that? Hey, would you like red or white? You know, do you like hard liquor, or do you like spirits? When you're around, you can kind of recognize when you hear the words, maybe you shouldn't drink tonight. I mean, if someone's telling you that, that might mean you probably abuse alcohol a little bit more. If you recognize yourself lying and saying, I've only had one drink, that's that can be a real indication right in front of your face. Or you've said, I'm fine, I can drive. I try to really instill in the kids behavior that I feel they're going to need into adulthood. And one of those things is allowing them to hold me accountable for my actions. And I think I'm trying to encourage those that might be listening to recognize that if you start to see these tendencies, or you start to recognize that I've had a long week and I just want to have a couple of drinks tonight or tomorrow night, that it's okay to enjoy, but you also have to recognize that it can get out of hand pretty quickly. And making a mistake, a major mistake, can really change the direction of your life. And I'm talking about, um, for example, the fact, Brendan, that my daughter's 15, and she's going to be learning how to drive, and I'm not necessarily so much concerned about her driving skills. I'm more so afraid of her being on the road late at night with distracted drivers, drunk drivers, and we hear those scary stories all the time. I would like to think that there's folks like you and I that can be advocates um, to those around us, that um, when you see signs of this, and we can do take preventative measures that we should. I mean, for those that might be listening, Brendan, what are some things that you think are important for them to understand, especially if they are starting to recognize that maybe my drinking is a problem?
You know, I am really glad you opened up that can of worms. uh, there's so much to be said on that topic. And like I said before, the last few years of my drinking, I had drank myself into isolation. And it wasn't so much people were cutting me off, I was cutting them off. And I took offense to people when they would sit there and say, you know, Brendan, have you thought about stopping drinking? You know, and I'd sit there and go, who are you? What right do you have to tell me what to do? This is America. I should be able to do whatever I want. And I didn't realize how wrong I was. And these were just people that were they loved me and they were concerned about my safety as well as everybody else's. Because, you know, like I did get behind the wheel when I was intoxicated. I did do those things. And I cut people off and I'd say, you know, it's none of your business what I do with myself. Okay. But that goes back to what I was saying before. Alcoholism is a very selfish, self-centered disease. You know, you don't see and you don't care what you're doing to other people. Okay. That being said, I always apply that line of thought, and I remember when people on several occasions have gotten on the phone to me and they'll say, hey, Brendan, you know, like my husband, my son, relatives or friends, they have a drinking problem. This is what their phone number is. Can you give them a call? And I always do the same thing. I say, no, this is my phone number. They can give me a call. Okay. They need to take the initiative. There's nothing that I can tell somebody to get them sober. There's nothing I can do as far as telling them, okay, you need to do this, and you can't will a person into sobriety. They need to hit bottom. They need to realize, and they need to be ready to do whatever it takes to get sober. And it's not an easy thing to do. To initiate it, you need the willpower to go ahead and put one foot in front of the other and try to get yourself into a meeting or a recovery place or do something in order to institute stopping drinking. But in the end, it takes a complete surrender, like I was describing to you, to go ahead and to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, because he's the one that's going to save you. Okay. And I can't emphasize that anymore. I can go ahead and I can grit my teeth and get through the day without a drink. And I can do that one day after another. However, I still have that alcoholic tendency, that alcoholic attitude, all of the baggage that goes along with it. And I said before, it's like a round peg trying to fit into a square hole. And through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the mercy of God, I'm able to be here today, and I'm able to tell you these things, you know, and it's through that I'm able to stay sober. Okay. And then you're also talking about, the threat of, you got your daughter out there, you know, it's a very real threat, you know, and I said before that I had gotten behind the wheel, and I had done that on more than one occasion, that I was intoxicated and I was drinking, I was driving. And along the way, I got to meet these guys that were through a program called H&I, Hospitals and Institutions. And I went to a couple of events and I got to meet these guys that were in prison. And a lot of these guys are not alcoholic, okay? They just simply went around the block and they were watching a basketball game and they had about 3 beers, and then they got into the car and then they came back home, and along the way they hit somebody or done something really bad, and they ended up in prison. and I met more than just a couple of people that had just uh, bad luck, if you will. They went ahead and they injured some people or even killed some people while being intoxicated and being behind the wheel. And they're in prison now, and that's where they belong, because you shouldn't do that. I don't endorse drunk driving at all. But then it dawns on me, how come I was able to do that and I didn't get in trouble? What's going on here? And then I began to realize, and I'm certain of it now, that our Savior had different plans for me.
God gets our attention in very different ways, and that was his way of getting your attention. For others, it's it's situations and traumatic experiences like that where you have taken someone's life, or you have experienced something as bad as drinking at a party that led to date rape, for example. um, I think there's just too many aspects of how it inhibits your ability to properly function, and because it's so socially acceptable, that's really where the abuse can kind of come from, with regards to it's no big deal. And those are the kind of excuses that I think that a lot of people will use, even when they're in that denial and are trying to hide it, or they're searching to cure their stress, or that's their go-to. There's always something that triggers that use. Even a sense of hopelessness, like you were saying, the isolation. I think that there's statistics out that keep coming out about how alcohol consumption went up. And the reason I think I know that is because I'm seeing my share of text messages from friends I used to have in the Chicagoland area, and it's always finish this bottle and looks like it's going to be a great weekend. And it just made me like think to myself, like, those are things that we did as teenagers, and you have families, that the priority should be very different. But I pray for them, because you can go every day like that and realize that I don't think God's really meant for us to be used in that sense. As we kind of take things home, Brendan, any final thoughts that you might have for those that could have a relative or friend that might be suffering from something like this?
Yeah, I do. If you think that you've got a drinking problem, if you ask yourself, gee whiz, am I an alcoholic? Chances are you are. And I heard that in an AA meeting, and I had asked myself that a number of times. And I thought, oh gosh, you know. But then after having been there and where I am today, it's such a blessing, because unless I would have come to terms with that, I wouldn't have the things that I've got, and I get to live a transparent life today, because there was so much of my life that I couldn't share with anybody else because they simply wouldn't have understood it. So, like I said before, why should I be embarrassed about the smartest thing I ever did? But chances are, like if you're asking yourself, if you have to ask your spouse or something like that, do you think that my drinking's a problem? And chances are it is, and it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's just, I mean, I've got two brothers, wonderful brothers, and they don't have a drinking problem. I'm the one that got it. My luck of the draw. And that's not my fault. It's what you do with it that matters, and today I live a blessed life. And I'm able to use my experience. I can see how my experience can benefit others as a result.
Brendan, thank you for being courageous and sharing your story. And I hope that folks will find some inspiration from what you've said, because I can see that there's a range of emotions that I'm sure that can come about I mean, even just in reflection to some of the alcohol type related situations that I've seen growing up, it's very much similar to the road rage that I encountered as a kid, knowing that we were coming from a family party 45 minutes away. And in retrospect, there's so many things that could have happened. But you allowing yourself to truly surrender is such an important step. And I think as we close, just some items that I think really come to mind is, number one, if it comes to drinking, I think there has to be some honest and truthful looking in the mirror and saying, is this really what God meant for me? And the devil is going to continue to lead you into temptation, and you have to really rely on God to care for you, because you have to remember that temptation, even Jesus was tempted, and he's obviously our savior. He was tempted. We have to find hope and faith in him, and there's really no shame in receiving his help. And if he decides to send someone to you to help you, you have to be in a state of grace to recognize that this person's here to help you and not give you a hard time. And sometimes that's the tough love. But people love you. Jesus loves you. I love you. Brendan loves you. And you have to remember you're a beautiful child of God. So as we close down, just remember this particular podcast just might be God speaking to you through myself and through Brendan's story. Brendan, thank you for sharing. Folks, if you like this and you have someone that you want to share it with, we would appreciate you sharing it with a loved one. But folks, this podcast episode has ended. Go now in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to
Amen.
God.
Thanks be to God.